Hi, it's Chris McCann. Welcome to Ask Chris Anything. This message came in from Erica in Chicago, and she asks, I have the most peaceful, beautiful, and happy life. I seem to sometimes find it difficult to say no to people, and I feel that's not healthy. I think this would apply to many of us. While I appreciate that my family and friends come to me, I think I have to draw a healthy line. It can be monetary help, or they need somewhere to stay. I've had people stay as long as 8 months when it should have been just a weekend. Sometimes it's a matter of rearranging my plans to help them at a whim. I'm serious. I've delayed road trips, spent hours on the phone while on vacation. I recently did say no to someone who wanted to stay at our place for a few months with their children. This made me feel so incredibly guilty. It was something my husband and I decided because of this person's life choices. Still, I could feel the guilt and anxiety creeping up daily for months. My question to you is, how do I say no without feeling guilty? Saying no to other people without feeling guilty. I'll cut to the punchline first, and the punchline is by saying yes to yourself. But how do we get there? Well, it's interesting. So when I sat with this for a couple of days, Erica, and what I saw originally was you in this white t-shirt with a blue collar and these blue sleeves, and then over like your right upper chest there was a red heart. So it was almost like one of those I love blah t-shirts, and you were facing from my left to right, and one way of interpreting that was that you were facing from west to east, and it was just a sense that I got, and went from an old way of thinking or an old dogma to a newer way of thinking, or saying, bye to the sunset and where the sun's coming up. There's so much in a metaphor, but you're smiling and smiling knowingly and very comfortable with being alone. There was nobody else in this particular scene. You're very certain, principled, not dogmatic, very wise and allowing. So it doesn't seem as if you're ignorant or being taken advantage of emotionally. There's this knowingness. It doesn't feel as if people are taking advantage of you without your complicity. You're very well aware of what you're doing, and wanting to be of service, but it feels like it's you making this decision. I don't see anyone else around you, and maybe people come along with your decision or have a role to play, but this is your journey and this is your challenge. So it's for you to decide. It was interesting in that you were in the same position, right? So we're in this t-shirt facing west to east or left to right, and in the lower right hand corner I saw this really bright light coming out of this space. So it was almost as if this box was sitting on a table and this light came out, kind of, I guess what would feel like, you've seen album covers where there's this bright light, or like the Raiders of the Lost Ark, and you open up the lid off this thing and this huge light comes out, and it felt like divinity or source or love or God, and I asked what it was, and it was dark everywhere except for you looking at this, and the answer was, it's the truth, it's the heart of it all, which is beautiful. And so there was this reluctance for you to approach it and to look at it. I mean, you weren't scared of it. It's just like, I'm not sure what I want, if I'm ready for this. But there's this chasm between where you are and you fully stepping into this aspect of your divine nature. One thing that I saw, which was interesting, was that it showed me an image of you as a Catholic nun, and you're wearing this light blue habit, and you were like working on something, but it was like almost like an assembly line, and you were either making food or serving food or making clothes or handing out goods, and there's a real lack of satisfaction or even thinking that you were on the right path at that time. It's like, well, I'm doing all the right things, but it's not quite clicking, and I did what I was supposed to, when you could in fact have spent more time being in service of yourself. Does that make sense? So one of the things that came up was in this previous expression or lifetime or scene or story or whatever you want to call it, was in you doing everything by the book, very dogmatic, and like, if I follow these steps then I'm going to get to heaven, is one way of interpreting it. And it just didn't happen. right? And there was this lack of satisfaction at the end of this. So there was this overarching sense of, okay, there has to be something different. There has to be another way. So with that, you've developed this willingness or vulnerability to go inside of yourself. And there's this truth and understanding that what's missing with you, this connection with source or God or divinity. And it's not something that's outside of you, I mean, in this little box, but it is you, and it's requiring you to shift your thinking or your belief system a little bit. And it feels right, is the sense that I'm getting. It feels like, okay, when I lean into this, then it feels right. And I don't know, it doesn't, you have a bit of a time reconciling this with your way of thinking. So this guilt was almost not like taking care of Erica. So you finally saying no, in this last example in your letter, is a very critical step in recognizing that it's taking away from you. It's almost like when people are approaching you and it's like, hey, Erica, Mark, can we do this? Can I stay with you? And you say no, it's like, oh, okay, she's finally getting it. They're finally getting it. And that's interesting because now it has you asking these questions. There's a lot of observing, or like when people ask you this and you're beginning to note and take a pause and how you're acting, how others are reacting to you saying no, and then it's a little bit out of character. But there's a shift that can happen where others will look at you, not because of your ability to take them in and provide them with material goods or sanctuary or safety or meals, or because you have money to give to them or whatever, but of how you can be this beacon of light. And maybe people aren't able to identify, but when they're near you and around you, they just feel that same knowingness and sureness and wisdom. It just seeps out of your pores. And this is your nature, being this beacon of light, of love and hope, and stepping into it's going to allow you to be of greater service because you'll feel more assured and certain of your role here. It's going to feel more right. So if I had to summarize, it's like you feel guilty because you're just starting to understand that. And this putting your own self first is what's needed and necessary for this next part of your growth. So how do you say no without feeling guilty? It's by saying yes to yourself. And saying yes to yourself and your connection at a soul level with the individuals around you is you doing honor to them and to yourself, your higher self, your capital S self. And maybe not so much as human to human, because some people may not quite understand what that's like, but as a divine being to divine being relationship, or said even more simply, soul to soul. So step into yourself and trust, and it's almost like there's this radiance that you didn't fully trust or don't fully trust in this shining box over here, but you have this innate sense of knowing and an understanding of it, and it feels right, but it's a little scary because it's new and it takes you out of the sureness of this beautiful and wonderful life where everything is in its little box and it's in place and you can make sense of everything. But through this lifetime, you've had such an overwhelming ability to give that you've always been sacrificing yourself. And it's likely that you've lost out on a lot because you haven't been able to find that neutral point where you give and when you receive. So this message, Erica, is about you learning to stop giving when you know it's not in a proper balance for you to give. So recognize the boundaries that you require to harness the energy for yourself. You do not need to learn these lessons again in this lifetime. So let this be the life experience where first you open up to receive, and then if it feels good, you can give. That's a lot, but being able to say no on the surface level and saying yes to yourself, and it could be something as small as taking a walk by yourself, meditating, praying, but you'll know it, and I'm happy to help. Thank you for sending the question. I hope you find some value in this, and just know that you're loved. Happy Mother's Day.